Hello, good morning or afternoon. So thrilled to have everyone joining us for today's Deeper Insights webinar series. I am your host today. I'm thrilled to be here with Jamie Cohen. My name is Katrin Popescu. I am your marketing and communications manager here at Tech Canada. If you've joined us in the past, thank you for joining us again. As you know, of course, this is a bi-weekly webinar series. We're always thrilled to bring to you some of the top thought leaders and speakers across different industries and disciplines, all equipping you with the most timely and relevant insights. Today, as I had mentioned, it is our pleasure to be joined by Jamie Mason Cohen, an expert in leadership development and resilience. Jamie's background includes invaluable experience gained from working at, of course, none other than Saturday Night Live, as well as being honored as a recipient of the Dale Carnegie Business Training Award. Notably, Jamie is also a very in-demand Tech Canada speaker, and he speaks to our executive level groups, CEOs, business owners, entrepreneurs all across the country, and brings to them some of the most timely and relevant insights around his topic. We're thrilled that his toolkit of performance assessment, positive psychology, and proven leadership strategies, Jamie continues to empower individuals like leaders and Tech Canada members and their organizations to navigate the challenges and harness their strengths. Of course, Jamie, if there's anything I missed in here, please fill in the blanks, but Jamie's expertise has gained significant recognition, and he has been a frequent media commentator on CNN, Forbes, The Morning Show. I could go on. And of course, his famous TED Talk on leadership, which has garnered well over 2.2 million views. Now, whether you've joined us on Zoom, like many of you today, or you're across our social media streams, we're thrilled to have you and definitely encourage you to actively participate either through comments or Q&As in the chat. We'll be monitoring both, and we'll find some natural pauses throughout today's webinar to connect back to Jamie and have him address it. He's going to have some special guests today as well, so thank you to the guests joining us. Now, Jamie's unique perspective and wealth of experience will definitely equip you with practical and timely guidance on how to navigate massive change and constant disruption. I'm not going to take up any more time. Jamie, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. Over to you.
And we are live, literally from, well, not New York, from Toronto. So thank you for that introduction. Lorne Michaels used to say to us, the show was not ready because it was finished. The show was ready because it was 11:30 on Saturday night. What is your 11:30? That challenge, that problem, that opportunity that's keeping you up at night when it comes to massive change and constant disruption in your industry? Well, that's what this session is about today. You see, what I learned from working behind the scenes for Lorne Michaels for many years was that there was a pattern. There is a pattern of creative leadership. Lorne Michaels was modeling that, and it has a business case beyond it. You see, creative leadership is embracing uncertainty, forging new paths, and fueling innovation. And the data of the leadership circle, where I'm a certified practitioner, shows that when you raise your creative leadership, and we're going to go into detail on that today with real examples, you can raise your business performance by upwards to 37%. Now, creative leadership is based in the theory of vertical development and horizontal development. So horizontal development is developing the skills you need to navigate change and massive disruption. Vertical development takes it to another level. That's focused on raising your consciousness and your awareness as a leader so that you're equipped to deal with the complex challenges in a volatile, uncertain, and ambiguous world. So really, creative minds thrive in turbulent times. And that when we raise our creative leadership, our team also comes with us, because an organization cannot rise above the creative leadership and consciousness of you, its leader, and the executive team. So today we are going to tap into creative leadership strategies and stories, both from my time at Saturday Night Live, what I learned in creating a business reality show, Business on the Brink, that helped real business owners navigate change, and from someone in this community, a tech member who is essential to helping us through his experience move forward. Now, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. There will be moments when I'm going to ask you to engage because I want to tap into the collective intelligence of you, the audience. There's tech chairs here, some of whom I've had the pleasure of working with and collaborating with. There's also executives, CEOs, key executives, and aspiring entrepreneurs. So there's something in it, everyone who participates today. So here's how I started at Saturday Night Live, which was my first understanding of empathy. Empathy is caring what other people on your team thinks. And it's been shown with the data of the leadership circle that when you empathize with people, when you show warmth before competence, especially during difficult times, it has the ability to make people feel comfortable and safe. So there I was backstage at Saturday Night Live waiting for my interview. I was nervous. I was actually pacing back and forth. I didn't know where I was. I was from Toronto, and here I was. I finally got the interview with Lorne Michaels after calling 25 times. I was nervous, my body language, I was back and forth in this small writer's room, and I heard this voice, this larger than life presence behind me in the door behind me. And I didn't want to look, but that voice sounded familiar. And I thought, oh, please don't sit beside me. Please don't sit beside me. I just want to mind my own business until Lorne Michaels came, who was late. And he sat down right beside me. And he said, hey, who are you? And I looked, and it was no other than Chris Farley, the legendary performer who passed away. But this was about 3 months before he passed away. He said, who are you? I said, oh, I'm just Jamie. I'm here to see Mr. Michaels. And he said, oh, you're here to see the boss? And he spoke with me for the next 20 minutes. But here's the thing. He actively listened. He told me how much he appreciated things I was telling him. I was this kid just out of University of Western Ontario, and I had nothing to offer him. And yet he didn't judge. He was there. He was present. He was grounded in what I had to say. And I told him that my Pee Wee baseball coach happened to be on the movie Tommy Boy, where he was the star. Because my coach, I only know this because my dad was friends with the coach, was his addiction counselor, because Chris Farley had an addiction issue. And he said, oh, you know John? That's not his real name. He goes, Jamie, Jamie knows John. And I don't want to be, I apologize in advance. I don't want to be too name dropsy, but I'm not going to mention that Adam Sandler might have been in the room when he said this, but I wanted to hide. I literally was like a turtle. I wanted to hide under the table because I was mortified that the center of attention was toward me. But what this did was this taught me in that moment that before we get into tactics and the practical horizontal, the vertical feeling he gave me was my consciousness raised. I was calm. I was relaxed. And I walked into Lorne Michaels and I ended up getting the job. And I never forgot Chris Farley for teaching me the first lesson of navigating change, which is empathy. It starts with warmth before competence. Now, what happens next? Well, toward the end of my time at Saturday Night Live, 9/11 happened. I was in New York on September 11th, 2001, and Lorne Michaels was going to cancel the show. It would have been the first time in history that a show was canceled because of what happened. And obviously, it wasn't a time to laugh. It wasn't a time where people felt comfortable. But Lorne Michaels said, we'll continue the show later. But here's what happened. There was an intervention. The main government leaders of New York City at the time, it was the mayor's office, the Port Authority, fire, and police. They held an emergency meeting with Lorne Michaels, including business leaders, and they said, Lorne, the show must go on. This is more than a show. This is a beacon of hope. This is letting people know, not just in New York, but around the world, that life goes on and that we're not going to be held hostage to a situation like that. And so he realized at that moment that the show was more than just a comedy hour and a half every week, but it meant something to people's life. It had purpose. And the takeaway was the show went on. And I recently did a talk for Vistage groups in New York City. And one member of the audience said, I remember that show that was held 10 days later. He said, that was awkward. I said, I know. It was awkward. People were crying in the monologue. People forgot their line and drifted off. But that wasn't the point. The point was the show had a deeper meaning and significance. And what was that? That humor heals. Humor has the power to bond. Humor has the power to unite people during difficult times. And so I ask you, what is the purpose of your company? What is the purpose of your tech group beyond just getting people together to talk about business or to deliver a product? Because that, my friends, is the key foundational point, is your purpose sets the tone. And it's not just you as the leader telling your group, this is why this company matters, or this is why this project matters. There's a place for that. But in today's business environment, especially with younger workers who want this deeper sense of meaning, they expect you to let them know how their work matters. It's tapping into the personal purpose of each member of your team. And that's why when creative leaders lead with a deep sense of purpose, they demonstrate a compelling vision that's connected with that purpose for the future. And they live and they integrate deeply held values, which might not change. They probably don't change through crisis. They will see possibilities and pursue them on levels not imaginable even before that crisis. This is what the data shows us. The top 1% of leaders have a clear purpose. Now, how do you help teams develop that sense of purpose before you dive into the issues and the strategy and the processes you need during times of crisis? Well, I'm going to share with you something that I do with tech Vistage groups. I also do this with leading groups, small and mid-sized companies when I work with them. And we start sessions asking the team, not just the CEO or the chair. We ask the team, why is it important that you chose to be here? It might be an obvious question, but we sometimes don't spend enough time. And once you ask that question, you can also ask a follow-up question. What is it about helping to shape the future of this company that is important to you, to the organization, to the community, to their family, to the world? And what this does is it creates what I call a purpose interview. It gets two people talking who might be more introverted and not want to share with the group. And then we debrief about what that interview was with the entire group. And this is a magical way. This is a consciousness raising way from the very get-go, where you will hear within a meeting, within a tech session, what matters to the people beyond what they do, beyond the basic or superficial level. And then we get into the strategies and the practical takeaways. So set up purpose because it will set the tone as you navigate change. So I left Saturday Night Live probably because I'm not that funny. And well, also my visa expired, which didn't help. But when I left Saturday Night Live, I left with this toolkit of abilities, technical abilities, and also the ability to direct and produce. So when COVID hit, I said, look, how do I combine my understanding of what works for a reality show, for a live show, with what I know from speaking in the business world? So as was mentioned, I've spoken about 60 times between tech and Vistage, and I have many more. I think some of you on the call that I can't wait to meet up with you shortly and work with your teams. And I said, what did I learn from both of these worlds and how do I combine them to help people? Because my purpose is to improve people's lives, to increase your business performance, and really tap into your strengths and leverage those strengths so that you can develop to your fullest potential. And I created a show, which is what this session is called Business on the Brink. And what Business on the Brink is about is, it was my way of looking at what can business owners do during times of change. And COVID was obviously the most pronounced, momentous change that any of us have faced in our lifetime. And what I learned was there were specific things that you could do, that I could do, to navigate change on a practical level. So if you want to see the actual YouTube show that I created, it's on the screen now. You can take a screenshot of it. And the example that I'm going to use is from that show. It's actually episode 6 and goes on. And my research was that 68% of jobs are created by small businesses in Canada. Isn't that extraordinary? So no matter how successful your business was, constant disruption pushed, in many cases, your livelihood and your family's future to the brink or to new heights. It depends on how you frame this, but help was on its way. So I created Business on the Brink, which is a business reality show where recently successful small business owners whose businesses were at risk of shutting down due to unexpected forces, or were searching for new ways to take their business to the next level, they were seeking real-time advice from a panel of renowned, highly successful, and innovative mentors to keep them going. So this was Dragon's Den with purpose and empathy. I had Scott Moore, who was one of the visionaries behind Sportsnet and was one of the chief executives at Rogers. I had some tech speakers like Tech Canada Speaker of the Year, Gary Maxwell. Allison Schaefer, who is one of the leading, if not the leading parenting expert and family expert in Canada. Ron Tite, Mark Bowden. These are leading business speakers in sales, marketing, finance. Preet Banerjee, who is Oprah Winfrey's finance expert on a reality show. And I said, how can we help them, if not solve the problem, dive deeper into the problem first? Because another thing in navigating change, and this is a takeaway, before we jump to the solution, the studies show, let's identify and clarify and examine the problem. And we might ask the question, is this the best problem to solve? They might not be on the right path. So here's what we did. This was our first guest, which was, I want to talk about, was Matt Dunbar. So Matt Dunbar had a $2 million a year company that was growing significantly. And he's the co-founder of a catering company called No Small Feast. Matt found that during COVID, his whole business completely evaporated. Nobody was gathering for his catering business. So he listened to the feedback from the mentors, and he was humble, he was open, he was curious. And here's the results. He tripled their staff. They have a second location, and all things are definitely looking up. So what are some of the things he did that we can learn from today within his business and the mentors helped him with? Well, the basic thing was, I want to leave with you, is he challenged basic assumptions about how he delivered value with his partner. Massive change requires leaders willing to change anything and everything in the organization to achieve breakthrough results. So everything is up for grabs. There's no sacred cows. Culture, people, processes, technology, and the business model. That might be a little controversial because changing people, that's a bit uncomfortable. But there might be a place other than some key personnel, your values and your purpose, even though purpose can shift too, to shake things up during times of change. And that's what they did. So you got to go well beyond your comfort zone to alter old patterns. And here's what they did. The first thing they did was they changed what their business was, but staying true to their values. Nothing was sacred. And he said, the frozen line we launched sustained us, kept us through the pandemic, and I kept us relevant. So that was one of the suggestions that the mentors made. What about a frozen food line? And there was a bit of pushback, but then he dove into it and they ended up seeing extraordinary results. The second thing they did is they explored new possibilities and innovated strategically. He said the lessons we learned when creating and running that style of food really helped us as we've moved that style of food into the airline space. So they grew because they found a new sector they didn't know they previously were qualified for or could add value in. And so now they're making packaged meals for charter flights to Cuba. And then the third thing they did was, as simple as this was, they were curious learners during crisis. They opened them up to the mentors in the group. Matt and Mike, his co-partner, were humble, curious. They listened, they asked questions, they acted on suggestions from leaders with multiple perspectives. In the second half of this, which is going to start in about 10 minutes, I'm going to introduce you to Keith McIntyre, who demonstrated and modeled this level of creative leadership to grow his business significantly during the recent times of crisis we've been in. And that's what No Small Feast did as a really valuable takeaway. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is, and I can't see it in the chat bar, but we're going to keep moving here. What's an example you can share, a story of how you or your business you've worked with have adapted to change and disruption in a powerful way? And what's a lesson you could pull from that story? It's good before we move on to really cement learning by tapping into what matters to you, because we don't learn as adults by hearing me talk. which I hope you do. I hope you absorb it on some level. Even by doing, we reflect on why we do what we do. So I'm going to ask you right now and to think for a moment, even if it's a few words, what's an example, a story, even a prompt, a word or two of how your business has adapted to change in a disruptive and powerful way so we can tap in to the collective intelligence of the room. So take about 20 seconds to do that. And I might come to that at the very end with our hosts in order to look at some of those answers so we can reflect before we end the session today. How have you adapted to change in a powerful way during times of crisis? And what's the lesson there that we all can take away that we can help each other and add value both ways? So go ahead and do that. And as you're thinking of that, to go over what we just talked about, we talked about the power of empathy to set the stage, to show warmth before competence before we get into those strategies. That's raising vertically our level of consciousness so that our organization can see that as a model and by virtue of our example, raise with us so that we have the power to solve those complex problems. And then we talked about purpose. Purpose is finding meaning and significance beyond what we do, why we do it, and really look at how that makes us want to get up in the morning to deal with anything that's thrown at us. And the example I used was how Saturday Night Live was more than just a TV show. It was about healing. It was about humor can heal, bond, and unite people. So as you're thinking about that, you can continue thinking about it and write in the chat bar. I want to move on to the next area. The next area is identifying our strengths and building more awareness. Tech is brilliant at creating an environment where people can be vulnerable in a safe space within their business contexts and build self-awareness. I've seen this in the tech rooms that I've been in, and it blows my mind how these chairs, who are some of the leading business leaders in Canada, do it. You're brilliant coaches, and I learned from you just as much as your group might learn from me. So one way that I've brought this into tech groups is through the Leadership Circle data. So the Leadership Circle is a tool that empowers leaders with clear-cut insights into your leadership strengths and development opportunities. So creative leadership is divided into the top of the circle, which are your creative competencies. So those are areas that unleash competent power when it comes to doing your job effectively as leaders. It's inspiring. People feel engaged in their roles when you demonstrate these roles as a leader. So these are areas like purposeful visionary and courageous authenticity and community concern and strategic focus. But then there's other areas at the bottom, which are reactive tendencies. Those are still strengths, but if they're overextended, overused, or overdependent on, they could become liabilities. So the takeaway is we want to tap in more to our creative competencies and lower our reactive tendencies in order to be the best leader we can in order to impact our team with creative leadership. Now, here's something that, and so here's what I've done with teams. So I'll have teams do the tool. This is a CEO advisory board group. I'll have them do it as a group, but I'll also have them do it individually. And before sessions now, between 8 and 8:30, if the session starts at 8:30, if they show up at 8 because the show starts live, we will do a one-on-one quick session where we analyze their creative competencies and even their reactive tendencies to see what's the number one area they can grow within their creative leadership during times of change. And members have really enjoyed this and taken me up on it. So here's the free tool that you can use, or if I come into your team, I assure you that I'm going to be using it, and that is the Leadership Assessment Survey. So here's what it looks, here's the instructions if you want to take a screenshot once I get it up here. So you're just going to go to this website, click free assessment, follow the instructions, and after you do that, it's going to go to your mailbox or your members' mailboxes, and they can do it. They can come in and get the assessment done. If you didn't catch this, I'm easy to reach out to. Reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll send you that information. But what this is this is an assessment. It will not tell you anything about yourself. it will benchmark how you or your team member evaluates themselves or yourself against a benchmark of your peers. So for example, if you're showing up as a high, let's say you're not showing authenticity, you're not really wanting to discuss the difficult things, the data will show you that that's how you know on a deeper level how you're showing up. I recently did this with a CEO advisory board group, and a woman emailed me after and she said, oh, at first I was defensive. I said, I'm authentic. My husband knows me. I am honest and real. And the data showed me otherwise. And I got nervous a bit. But then I realized when we discussed it in the session, what does authenticity really mean? Well, authenticity is discussing the undiscussables. Create is authenticity. You are the one who will be the first person to not confront, but deal with things head on, even if it's uncomfortable. You'll have those courageous conversations that I sometimes bring into tech groups. And she said, oh, I don't do that very much. You're right. I'm honest, but that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about dealing with the tough issues head on and having those conversations with team members. I have to work on that. That was a breakthrough. That was an aha moment. So that's what the leadership circle data can help you with. So now moving on, let's look at a quick example of a creative leader who runs, his job is, this is someone who, I know some of you are in manufacturing, about 24% of tech is in manufacturing. This is a VP plant manager. So this is a case study in how this plant manager effectively dealt with change by using the data, but you don't need the data to know this. So this was a manufacturer of automatic transmissions, vehicles, for vehicles, assembly and test, manufacturing, engineering, product quality. And their company, he had three purposes of doing a leadership circle assessment in order to help himself grow as a creative leader. He wanted to expand what he learns as an individual and strengthen how he interacts with others on his team. He wanted to increase empathy. He said he was low on empathy, and he knew that himself. He also wanted to increase fulfillment of what his company called three joys: the joys of producing, the joy of selling, and the joy of buying from production creation through a lifetime owner loyalty through the end of life. And he also wanted to integrate the company's philosophy to strengthen leadership across Canada and achieve their ideal image. So here's what happened, and here's the takeaway, even if you haven't done the leadership circle profile. Here's what this VP realized. When there's a crisis, instead of jumping in and taking control like he used to, he's letting his leadership team do that. Did you hear what I said? So this is effective collaboration. I saw this at Saturday Night Live. Lorne Michaels was a delegator. Even in times of crisis, especially in times of crisis, he relied on his production team to find solutions. And he was there as a last resort. So he let go of control, even though he had control in the final word. So that one change of when there's a crisis, instead of jumping in and taking control like he used to, letting others within the leadership team, his management team, take care of it, that made all the difference. And it was tied to quality of products and productivity of their plant, essentially their business. Here's what happened. Productivity increased by 8%. Safety, the incidence of safety rate dropped 9 to 6 to 0.5, the lowest in the company's recent history. And the quality, specifically the customer complaint measure, setting company records going from 90 to 19. And it was all with this one nuanced understanding of himself and having the courage to reflect, build that awareness of delegating more effectively, and that helped him build self-awareness. Now, another thing that I do with tech groups, it's unconventional, but I've gotten great feedback, so I'll share it with you today, is it's something called signature leadership. So I've actually created a podcast where I'm going to be interviewing some chairs as well during this process, where I help world-class leaders uncover their authentic selves through executive speed coaching, really quick fire speed coaching, and handwriting analysis. So I've done this on TV shows like CNN. I've done this on the social. I have a TEDx talk which incorporates this. So I have the ability that I can look at someone's writing at its starting point, and I can help them ask questions about their problem, reframe it, and we walk away with an implementable strategy that they can use in making a micro step, an incremental step forward toward that goal. Helping world-class leaders not only uncover their authentic selves during times of change and disruption, but how to reframe those challenges so they can increase their consciousness. So if we work together, you can ask me about that, which I've only started adding before sessions and during lunch, and members and chairs have found that extremely helpful. One member said it's like 3 therapy sessions in about 3 minutes. So moving on. Before we hear from our tech member and a leader of a fantastic company navigating change, I wanted to share with you a few quick takeaways of what the Leadership Circle data shows us about the patterns of transformation that leading companies are doing consistently. And so really, this is about identifying leadership behaviors that will help you and your team more effectively navigate change. And here are the top 5 according to what the data is. And as we go through this, I want to ask you, which of these behaviors do you perform most effectively during change and disruption? And which of these 5 behaviors might you need to work on? And that's something also I'd ask you to just spontaneously improvise and put into the chat bar as we go through it. And here's what some of them are. We're not going to go into too much depth, but our next guest is going to elaborate on some of these in his own way. The first is highlighting what hasn't changed and isn't changing in your company. What are the important values? What are the values? What's the purpose that your company exhibits? So for example, an example might be in manufacturing. A small manufacturing company undergoes change. A small change includes emphasizing unwavering commitment to quality and customer satisfaction, reassuring stakeholders through testimonials, social media, and employee training. Let's look at another one, acknowledging the losses, what we're giving up and leaving behind. So this is going to take a lot of empathy and a demonstration that you really understand where they're going through. But what could we do to acknowledge the losses? Well, if you're a business transitioning to automation, openly addressing potential job losses without sugarcoating it, but again, empathizing and being compassionate to those who might be affected, but not holding back and being inauthentic, disingenuous. Holding a town hall meeting where you let people speak their minds without being defensive as a leader, acknowledging their emotions, not just what their concerns are, offering reskilling programs and supporting employees and finding alternative employment. Those are a few things that you can do. And the last 3, I'm not going to give examples. I'm just going to show you what they are. Celebrate milestones and progress of your team. Make the transformation story come to life so that if you believe it, they will believe it. Change management sometimes fails because leaders are tentative and wishy-washy. You've got to go all in, not just with your words, your actions, your body language, your tone of voice. Your actions speak so loud, it doesn't matter what you're saying. So you've got to show them that this is happening and that we're all on the same boat here, even if there's change and disruption happening within the transformation. And then let's look at 4 and 5. Highlight where the future is already realized. Number 4, celebrate the small areas where you've already achieved the transformation's desired state. Focus on incremental changes and improvements. Don't just wait till the end to compliment people. Celebrate those as you go. Incremental change is essential, but sometimes overlooked. And finally, the last part of our transformation initiatives, which are key during change, are give your people, especially your performers, more things they care about whenever you can. Access to you, interesting opportunities, autonomy, freedom from hassles. Ask your team at the beginning of the week during change, what's one thing I can do to make your life easier this week? Just go the extra mile and do it. Help them out. So those are 5 ways during transformation that have been proven. Over 150,000 leaders cumulatively said these are the kinds of things that have changed their business and helped them grow and adapt during times of change and constant disruption. So now would be a good time. Let's pause for a moment. I'd love to see, even though I can't see, but our host, Stephen and Catrinelle, what are maybe some of the questions before we transition to our guest speaker today, a business owner who's in the trenches and who has succeeded and thrived extraordinarily well.
Hi, Jamie.
Hello.
Thank you so much so far for all of that. No questions, however, some great comments, not here on Zoom, but especially across our social media channels, leaders sharing some examples where in a very short amount of time, back to your original question about 10, 15 minutes ago, where they had to pivot and set up a brand new platform in a matter of 2 weeks. And let me just grab that really quickly to share it with you. This came from Paula, and she shared that School of Rock had to quickly adapt to the pandemic and developed an online lesson platform in a matter of 2 weeks. And so back to that, again, that creativity, the thinking on your feet, leaders just stepping up to the challenge and doing something in a very short matter of time.
I love that. Thank you for that example. And I appreciate that engagement. Well, perfect. Well, if that's it,
You bet.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And there's nothing like an example, as tech members know, right? When you get an example, it brings everything together beyond just the facts or even a good story. We want those takeaways. And when you tell business stories, make sure you have that takeaway for people so that it cements the learning. It touches them on their head and their heart. Okay, so moving on, I am thrilled to introduce a guest today who I know because I spoke with his tech group, Ed McClellan's group, which I've spoken just now several times. And then we worked together. I saw his company work together incredibly well. They were this really empathetic, purpose-driven team. And I worked with him outside of tech. And what I learned was this company, KMAC, which is led by Keith McIntyre, who is their CEO and founder. Keith his mission is elevating skills and performance of sales organizations. And he has 30 plus years working with Fortune 500 companies, professional athletes, North America's largest sports properties, in growing businesses and putting brands on top. I observe this. I've asked Keith to come and share some of his insights into how he's led extraordinarily well through times of change and disruption. And the time that I met with him to I think it was 6 months later, he went from the #1 leader in his field, and he even grew beyond that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to introduce you, and those of you who already know, reintroduce you to Keith McIntyre. Hi, Keith.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me. Great chat so far. I love it.
Wonderful. Let's start off with, what are the 2 biggest lessons that have emerged for you and your business since the pandemic? So post-pandemic.
#1, Jamie, disruption. It's inevitable. #2, uncertainty. That's a term we hear a lot about. So you have to be prepared to respond to significant threats, whether it's the pandemics, climate change, financial, cyber, work disruption, teams, all of those, we're going to be facing it constantly as we move forward.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I love how succinct that was. What about founders' mentality? This was an issue that you spoke with me. What does that mean to you, specifically during times of change and disruption?
We call it day one. This is where we call it, we actually play what we call the bigger picture game. So it's a mindset, and it's not a strategy. It's about encouraging individuals to look at their roles, see the world through a different lens, be open to exploring different perspectives, embracing continuous learning, collaboration. That's one big thing that's come away from this. We can't tackle uncertainty when we're by ourselves. We need to work together with people, and whether it's clients and our teams, setting high standards that attracts people. Long-term thinking. It's not about short-term gains, long-term thinking.
I love that long-term thinking mentality, because it's so easy during a crisis to only put out fires. But how do we move beyond that?
So much.
then the next point that you brought up when we planned this, and we spoke about this ahead of time, was customer obsession. What does customer look like? And can you think of an example during a time of crisis or massive change within your business?
Customer obsession can be defined in so many different ways. The way I look at it and how our organization looks at it, it's starting with the customer and then working backwards from there. So we evolve and grow our businesses, our services, based on what our customers need. So you commented earlier about personal goals and objectives. It's really about understanding corporate objectives, but personal goals. The intersection of purpose and drive, this is what makes a difference. And this is what happened during the pandemic. We shut down, everybody shut down, dental offices in our field were shut down. We wanted to become the most prepared team coming out of the pandemic. And during that time frame, not only that, we launched the most expensive product in the history of oral care toothbrushes, which was over $400, and it has excelled because we took a different approach.
Wow. So taking a different approach was, and like we said at the beginning, right, which was, it's not about doing more. It was about doing things differently, doing things a little more creatively that made the difference.
Exactly. And it's about the differentiation, but it's about not being afraid to take risks and try new things. Listen to what customers are saying and what your team's saying. But if it's not working, move on, learn from it, and continue to grow.
How did you tap into what your customers were saying and wanted in that one pivotal moment? Was there anything that you did differently or nuanced to shift? Because you made a significant shift. You were already number one, but you almost doubled that.
Well, prior to the pandemic, as we were building, everything was what we call a hamster wheel effect. So it was very transactional in the sales process. We used this window to retrain our team, and we flipped our strategy around. And that was the hardest thing we've ever done. You talked about incremental gains. That's exactly what we did. You have to go step by step. So then we created what we call highest payoff activities. This is what business plan development, highest payoff activities, zeroed in on what the customers and what matters most. This started with interviewing, and instead of going in and talking features and benefits and even what these products can do for your dental practice, for example, we really zeroed in on what's important to them. Tell us about what you've seen change. How are you adapting to change? What's your vision? How are your systems working? And here's how we then can connect the dots and help you.
Love it. Love it. What about ownership? What does ownership mean to you? You mentioned earlier thinking long term. I think that's where the starting point is, but can you expand on that a little more on that level?
The way I look at it, it's control what you can, not what you can't. So when we look at long-term thinking, don't sacrifice short-term gains just to win. Really value long-term position the customer. It's about what the customers want. It's their vision of value creation, not yours, it's theirs. So people have to be accountable to deliver against this type of strategy. And this is a hard strategy when it's very customer centric. The vision, measure what matters, but what matters most to the customer. The only way you can find that out is by asking questions that are of value to them. So stop talking and really focus on listening to what they're telling you, and then come back with some solutions.
Love it. What about speed? Because before you answer, at Saturday Night Live, in that environment, it really was about speed. There was a sense of urgency. The show was not ready because it was finished. The show was ready because it was 11:30 on Saturday night. So we had to have a meaningful outcome by 11:30 every night. There was a sketch idea, and it had to be a finished product, regardless of how people felt, regardless of what was happening in their personal life, regardless of any of the massive changes that were surrounding them. They had to navigate that disruption and innovate every single week. What about that? How does speed affect your business during a time of crisis and going through disruption?
Speed is one of our standards. We place it called urgency over perfection. If we wait for perfection, nothing gets done. So we really have to be able to work fast. What forces that is because customers are changing at a pace I've never seen before. We are talking absolute light speed. So when we roll out a new concept, we go out on the road. We want to see it in action. While we're out on the road, we can make adaptations. So when I see something not working, Jamie, we take that and we adapt to it. We say, okay, we got to evolve this. If it is working, we bring it back very quickly to the office, and then we roll it out with our entire team within a couple of weeks, because we know the impact it'll have on our team across the country. So an example would be one of the big dentists that we were talking to him about his 15-year career. What has he seen change? How has the change now impacted his vision coming out of the pandemic? What does he want to do with his life and his practice? He identified 3 key areas of change that he wanted to make and what he wanted to achieve. Our job was to customize our products and systems to help him achieve those goals. That all took place over the course of 2.5 weeks.
Okay. Huh.
If you don't move, competitors will take your spot. So you got to be there.
You got to be there. Yes, it's so true. Finally, learn and be curious. We looked earlier at examples of when Matt and Mike from No Small Feast, they were in their own crisis. They only had a few months runway before their business would shut down. I'm not comparing your businesses. They got even more open. They didn't double down on what they were doing as caterers. They were open to learning from a group of mentors who never met them before and were giving them ideas that seemed really out of the box, but they were allowed themselves to think out of the box. You strike me from our conversations and working with you as someone who has a firm ground and understanding of what your core business is, but yet you're also not afraid to take calculated risks and to learn. You're more of a learn-it-all than a know-it-all. What does it mean to be learning and curious during a time of change for a business?
I just want to go back on one key point you mentioned, and it's called networking. So networking and having mentors can become a variety of areas. Mentors can be people, mentors can be books, they can be like the Harvard Business Review and so forth. But if you have people that you can learn different perspectives, learn from people who have been ahead of you, and learn from their mistakes, and learn what you pick up what you can and apply it. But also don't forget people that perhaps are not at your level, and learn from them, because they're seeing the world in a different perspective. So always move forward, continually change. What I have learned is yesterday's wow for what got us there fades real quick. In fact, the second that it's achieved, we're on to something new and it's already lost. So read, observe, ask questions. But the key is applying what you're learning. So many people read books. I hear great comments, but take 1 or 2 of those, apply them, and then see how that works. Build high standards from that. So learn from organizations that are really succeeding, but apply.
Apply. And on that note, before we ask for a Q&A, these are a few takeaways that you can implement in your tech group, in your business, as an aspiring entrepreneur today. It's midday. I know we're in different time zones. I'm in Eastern Standard. You can clarify your purpose and tie that purpose to your vision, why you do what you do. But more than just that, what's the meaning? What is your humor heals and bonds and connects people like Saturday Night Live? What is the thing that makes you want to get up in the morning because you're adding value and you're serving others on such a deep level that only you can do that? Because purpose is a differentiator, especially during times of crisis, when you're showing that, like Keith said, there's a long-term perspective here. It's not just a short-term gain. The other thing you can do is you can practice empathy. Empathy in terms of emotional intelligence is understanding people on an emotional level and speaking to their heart, not just their head. I see many CEOs who are brilliant analytical minds, but not everybody relates purely on a logical level. People also want you to understand, to tap into, to appreciate, to in some ways feel what they're feeling, but not enough that you don't have to wear your emotions on your sleeve, but it's just to let them know that you hear them, you see them, and you feel what they're feeling, and you're making decisions to help them grow. The other thing you can take away from this is there are some strategies where you can raise your creative leadership in a tactical way. There's the leadership culture survey. It's not the only one. There's many good leadership effectiveness surveys. It's one that I use because it's tied directly to business performance. And raise your leadership effectiveness, you can raise your business performance. I gave the example of my PRO framework. So look at the problem, focus on the problem or the possibility before we even look to solving it, and then reframe it for an incremental, small micro change and step forward. Because most leadership development fails because we don't implement, like Keith said, 80% of leadership development fails. Why? Because it might have great content, might make you feel good even, but there's nothing there where you say, I'm compelled to move forward with this step. So what can you do leaving here today to help you take one step toward building your creative leadership, whether it's raising your consciousness vertically or horizontal skill development? Now, at the end of every tech group session, I have something called an appreciation circle. Now, this is based on the talking circles. I was giving a talk before Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Dr. King, and she talked about when she was 5 years old, sitting around the table and seeing her mom, Coretta Scott King, and her dad, Martin Luther King Jr., with John Lewis and Ralph Abernathy and the leaders of the civil rights movement. They were sitting around a table and they were giving each other courage. They were showing each other vulnerability. They were talking about what the next steps were in their fight, nonviolent fight for civil rights. And she said she remembers that moment, even though she was so young, and her father was shortly thereafter assassinated. But that type of appreciation or learning circle where people get together in a circle. I recently did this with a group. We went out in the park and people were yelling around us in a group of CEOs, and we appreciated each other and what the session gave to us. And we also talked about what we learned from each other, what was useful about the session. So ending a session with both the head and the heart is a really wonderful, powerful, inspiring, and practical way to tap into both horizontal and vertical areas of creative leadership. So many of you will be looking at this maybe when it's recorded. So I'm actually going to ask Keith and I'm going to put each other on the spot to model this. Keith, what's one thing you gained from this session because you were here, it's the head? What was something useful? It could even be something reinforced you already know, but it might make you even take action and doubling down on that. And one thing you appreciate, and I'll do the same before we go.
Okay. Every time, Jamie, I learn more about the leadership circle. It's continually learning about myself. What I have to keep applying is how that leadership circle applies to my team. So I think it's so important. You started it last year. We have to continually reinforce. It's not just a one-time, let's talk about this. This is an ongoing progress. So it's like definitely an infinite game here.
Yeah, so you learn. And let's go with the heart. What's one thing? It could even be a word. It doesn't have to be in depth. What's one thing you appreciated about this session? And I don't want to preempt it, but it could even be about us, right? It could be about this connection. What's one thing you appreciated about this session or the content or a combination of those?
Growth.
I love it. Growth. That's what it's about, isn't it?
Yeah. Always.
And while I'll say I appreciate both tech for giving me this opportunity, I have gained so much in terms of, I love adding value to this community. Really, business owners are the backbone of this country. 70% of jobs are created by you. And the chairs, I'm getting goosebumps. I have learned so much about how to lead, facilitate, coach, guide, and some of the technical aspects of different businesses through the chairs of this community. So I am grateful and I appreciate both this opportunity I've been given with the chairs and members like you, Keith. You and I have collaborated and I learned from you in every conversation that we have. So thank you. I appreciate it.
We have one question from Jennifer Reynolds that we should probably quickly address.
Please do, yes.
How do you determine the difference between reacting with panic and responding with urgency? I've been part of organizations that move too quickly rather than taking the time to assess fully and not be too reactive.
We only have a few minutes. Keith, do you want to try to jump in there from your experience as a CEO right now, how you manage that fine line?
Yeah, as soon as things happen to us that are deemed crisis, I just really want to understand what level of crisis it is. Like, what impact is that going to have both on the business short term and longer term? And if it's a short term impact, then I think we are able to really react quickly. We got to tackle it no matter what. So put it at the forefront. But 9 out of 10 times that we receive what we call panic, it's really not that long-term, having a long-term impact on our business. So just breathe, assess it, and then tackle it. But if it needs to be escalated, then be prepared to roll your sleeves up and escalate it. I never feel that you can move too quickly. I feel that you can get caught if you assess too much. And it's about being proactive. So when I deal with turbulence, I use preparation and draw upon my experiences to say, okay, here's where I think the impact will be short term, long term. I don't know, Jennifer, if that helps, but that's how I approach it.
Thank you, Keith, and thanks for that. So the show always starts on time and it's got to end on time because we're on a schedule and our time matters. So I am going to start the same way I finished, and you can find me with my camera live from New York. It's Saturday night. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Jamie, Keith. Appreciate all of the learnings, insights. I took so much away. I've got my 2 key learnings, but I know we're up on time. Thank you to everyone that joined us again, both on Zoom, online, for your comments, Jennifer. And thank you for anyone that might be watching the recording. We really appreciate it. I've taken some screenshots, Jamie, so I look forward to implementing some of these learnings. And as always, thank you so much for all of the timely insights. Again, to everyone that's joined us, thank you so much for spending this past hour with us here at Tech Canada's Deeper Insights webinar series. If you are looking for them on our website, it's tech-canada.com, techcanada.com. I don't know why I had a moment of pause, but thank you again, and we'll catch you in a couple weeks. Jamie, have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you, Katrinelle. Thank you, Stephen.
Bye.
Bye, Keith.